There's a feeling that people get when they stand in front of an ancient monument. It doesn't matter if it is the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Kailasa Temple at Ellora, the Brihadeeswara Temple in Tamil Nadu, or one of the great cathedrals of Europe. The reaction is almost always the same. People look up, they go quiet, and then they ask a simple question. How did they build this? It is a fair question. Many of these buildings were made centuries ago. Some were made thousands of years ago. And yet they are still here. Because of that, many people end up thinking the same thing. Maybe the ancient people knew something we had lost. Maybe they were better engineers than we are. Maybe there was a golden age of knowledge that simply vanished. It is an easy idea to believe. Almost everyone who has stood in front of one of these monuments has thought it at least once. Have you not? Because these structures don't just look impressive, they look impossible. But the more I thought about this, the more I saw that we have been making a mistake from the very beginning. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The conversation almost always starts with a hidden assumption. If we are more advanced than the people of the past, then our buildings today should look more impressive than theirs. But when people compare a modern apartment block with the Kailasa Temple, the apartment block loses every time. The temple feels magnificent. The apartment block looks ordinary. The temple makes people stop and stare. The apartment block makes people think about maintenance fees. So, where is the mistake? The answer starts with the question most people never think to ask. What was this building actually made for? A modern office building is made for efficiency. A modern apartment block is made for cost, speed, rules and regulations, and for making money. Ancient monuments were built for very different reasons. A king did not commission a great temple because he needed another building. A pharaoh did not build a pyramid because he was running out of storage space. These structures were not practical solutions. These buildings were statements, political statements, religious statements, cultural statements. They were built to impress, to inspire, to intimidate, to demonstrate power, to last forever, to give the builder fame long after they were dead. That explains part of the mystery, but not all of it. Even after we understand the purpose, another question remains. How were people able to give so much time and effort to them? The answer is something the modern world rarely has. Time. An enormous amount of time. Many of the world's most famous monuments were not 10-year projects. Some took decades. Some took entire generations. Several cathedrals in Europe took over 100 years to finish. The workers who laid the first stones never lived to see the last ones placed. Think about that. Starting a project knowing that your grandchildren might be the ones to finish it. Today we complain if a road takes 2 years to fix. Ancient people gave entire lifetimes to a single building. Time gives you detail. Time gives you skill. Time lets small improvements add up over decades. When we look at these buildings today, we are not just looking at stone. We are looking at years and years of human effort frozen in place. The Kailasa Temple is the best example of this. Carving an entire temple out of a single mountain of rock is one of the most remarkable things any human being has ever done. Most buildings go up. This one was carved down. One wrong cut, one bad decision, and decades of work could have been destroyed. There was no undo button. Even now, people look at it and wonder if some secret knowledge was used. But the real answer is far more impressive than any secret. The answer is planning. Careful, detailed, extraordinary planning. Thousands of workers, decades of effort, generation after generation of skilled people. No magic, no aliens, no lost secrets. Just people doing very hard work for a very long time. That answer feels less exciting than ancient super technology, I know, which is a shame because it is actually more impressive. But here is where it gets really interesting because none of this answers the most important question of all. And it is one most people never think to ask. Many people look at an ancient temple that has been standing for thousands of years and think the materials might have been special. If an ancient building is still standing today while some modern buildings need repairs after just a few decades, doesn't that prove that the ancients knew something we have forgotten? It sounds reasonable, but the real story is more interesting. Ancient builders had a small set of materials: stone, brick, wood, lime, sometimes iron, and they got extremely good at using them. But they did not have what modern builders have: steel, reinforced concrete, materials made in factories to be stronger, lighter, and longer lasting than anything found in nature. So then, why are the old buildings still standing? One big reason is simple: they used more of everything. When you're not sure how strong something needs to be, you just make it bigger. Thicker walls, wider columns, deeper foundations. A modern engineer can calculate exactly how much material is needed. Ancient builders had to guess, and when in doubt, they added more stone. More stone tend to last longer. Think about the Brihadeeswara Temple. It feels almost impossible to destroy. The stones are enormous. The walls are thick beyond what seems necessary. But granite is not a forgotten material. We know how granite works. We still use it in our kitchens and living room floors. The reason modern builders don't use it more is not because they have forgotten how. It is because it costs too much. It is heavy and slow to move. It is hard to cut and shape, and it takes a very long time to work with. When a modern engineer looks at a granite temple, he does not see a mystery. He sees an enormous amount of money, and an enormous number of workers, and an enormous amount of time. Now, here is the part that changes everything. It is a simple idea, but once you hear it, you will never look at ancient history the same way again. Here is the most important idea in this whole video. We are only looking at the survivors. History only shows us the winners. Picture an ancient civilization that built 1,000 different buildings. Most were ordinary. Many were badly built. Some fell down. Others were left behind. Almost all of them are gone. But a small number survived. And they just didn't survive. They lasted for hundreds of years, sometimes thousands. Those are the ones we visit today. Those are the ones we see in documentaries. Those are the ones we read in history books. If you want to know more about this survivor bias, please check out this video I have done previously. Okay, coming back to our topic. So we're not comparing modern buildings with average buildings of the ancient world. We are comparing modern buildings with the very best buildings that ancient civilization ever produced. And that is not a fair comparison. It is like judging all modern writing by looking at a shopping list, while judging all ancient writing by reading Shakespeare. One side shows its best work, the other shows its everyday stuff. Once you understand that, something changes. The mystery starts to fade. Not because the monuments become less amazing, but because they start to make sense. The pyramids are still extraordinary. The Kailasa Temple is still extraordinary. The Brihadeeswara Temple is still extraordinary. But they no longer need a secret explanation. They just need a believable one. Big ambitions, skilled hands, huge number of workers, endless patience, and generation after generation all working towards the same goal. And here is something almost nobody says out loud when they talk about these monuments: preservation. Most people picture these buildings standing on their own for centuries, fighting off time and weather all by themselves. But that is rarely what has happened. The monuments we love today did not just survive history. Many of them were rescued from it. Think of the most famous sites in the world: the Taj Mahal, the pyramids, ancient temples, historic cathedrals. These are not left alone and forgotten. They are checked, cleaned, studied, fixed, looked after, preserved. Whole teams of engineers, historians, archaeologists, and experts spend their careers making sure these buildings reach the next generation. Some broken sections have been carefully rebuilt. Some sites are protected from pollution and weather, and many receive money and support from governments and organizations around the world like UNESCO. A building lasting 1,000 years is impressive. A building lasting 1,000 years because people in every single generation fought to keep it standing. That is something else entirely. Because buildings do not look after themselves. People look after them. And in a strange way, that means these buildings are still being built, not with stone and hammers anymore, but with knowledge, care, and dedication. The builders never really stopped. The tools simply changed. People often compare ancient monuments to modern buildings: a temple versus an apartment block, a pyramid versus an office tower. But that comparison might be the problem, because the most impressive things we have built in the modern world do not always look like buildings. Think about what it took to put a human being on the moon. Hundreds of thousands of people, over a decade of work, millions of individual parts that all had to work perfectly at the same time. No single person understood the whole thing. Teams of specialists spent entire careers on just one small piece of it. Or think about the internet, something so large and complicated that nobody can even draw a complete picture of it. Something that billions of people use every day without the faintest idea how it works. Ancient builders were brilliant, but they were solving different problems. They could not send a person to the moon or create internet. Comparing a granite temple to a modern apartment is like comparing a hand-carved chess set to a computer that can beat every player alive. Both are remarkable, just in completely different ways. And this brings us to a thought experiment. Imagine someone living in the year 4000. Most of our buildings are gone. Most of our records have disappeared. All they find are a few things that managed to survive. The ruins of a suspension bridge, a fragment of an undersea cable, a section of the Large Hadron Collider, or an aircraft carrier. What would they think? They might decide that people in our time had abilities that were later lost. They might come up with theories about forgotten knowledge and hidden secrets. But we know the truth. There was no magic. There was effort, planning, teamwork, resources, and time. Exactly the same ingredients that created the wonders of the ancient world. And that brings us back to where we started. Could modern builders build the pyramids? Almost certainly. Could they build the Kailasa Temple? Without question. Could they build the Brihadeeswara Temple? Absolutely. In many cases, they can build them faster, more precisely, and more safely than the original builders. The real question is not whether we can. The real question is whether we would. Would a modern society spend 50 years carving a temple out of a mountain? Would it pour all those resources into something whose only purpose is to be beautiful and to last? Sometimes the answer is yes. More often, the answer is no. Not because we are less capable, but because our goals have changed. Ancient buildings are not proof that our ancestors had magical powers. They are proof of what people can do when a whole society points itself towards one single goal. The ancients were not magical. They were not superhuman. They were something far more interesting. They were people just like us. But they were people who were willing to give their whole lives to something they would never get to see finished. The real secret behind these buildings was never technology. It was time. It was hard work. It was vision. And above all, it was the willingness of one generation to build something for the next. It is easy to admire what our ancestors built. The harder thing is to build something that people will admire long after we are gone. History does not remember the people who spend their lives admiring great things. It remembers the people who made them. Our ancestors have already earned their place. The question is whether we will earn ours. So please consider subscribing and interacting more. And so I will see you in the next one.